Hello, Professor and fellow classmates. Today we will be answering the question, why is the concept of Western civilization relevant for today? The concept of Western civilization is still relevant today because it has contributed on a global scale governmental systems that are still in use. And the ideology of civil liberties that are to be protected by our government systems, and that those civil liberties are not stagnant and capable of change and growth. So, the concept of a nation state is the main reason why we have the governments that we have today. And that concept came from Western civilization. According to Daniel Hannan in Inventing Freedom, he argues that the English were one of the first people to have an organized nation state way before the 18th and 19th centuries, where, in his words, radicals were asking for, and I quote, government of, by, and for the people. But this raised the question, who are the people? What people? This developed into the notion of a nation state. One people under one government that have a common identity so that the law applies to all. He continues to argue that a multinational state will never be able to have an effective democratic government because they wouldn't see themselves as common, as equal. So without the development of the nation states that were something that came from the Western civilizations, we would not be able to have democracy. Second is the civil liberties that came as a result of that democracy, of the identity of a shared nation state. Hannan argues in page 26 that the Anglo-Saxons believed that law, liberty, and representative government were part of their birthright. And that transferred over to the colonists that then came from England and other parts of Europe, right? But that identified as Anglo-Saxons and came across the Atlantic. Those rights also came with them. And that became the basis of our Declaration of Independence, right? That we have these birthrights. And that has become the foundation for our Constitution, where our civil liberties have been laid out, and that they are to be shared by all. Bradley J. Berzer, in What Exactly is the West, argues that every civilization, east to west, has a form of ethics, right? A form of treating the people in the in group. But he says that the West, uniquely, through philosophy, has allowed for people to understand that the person beyond my neighbor is still a fellow human and should be treated with human dignity. So he's saying here that yes, the West, obviously we know the problems that have come from slavery and racism and sexism, and all those problems are still around today. But the basic civil liberties that were developed from the Anglo-Saxon identity have been able to be shared, right? They were shared across continents. It became now this is a shared birthright for all the people of this state, of this land. And, this has become something that is accepted throughout the globe. And as a result of democracy, we have these liberties, and these liberties are not stagnant. They are not incapable of growth. Quite the opposite. Hannan argues that the law is being discovered in stages. So as humans develop and we continue to understand new philosophical ideas and thoughts, and our technology advances, so will our laws, so will our civil rights. In Reflections on Ancient and Modern Freedom by Alexander Rosenthal, he argues that true freedom is sustained only by virtue and reason, the way the Greeks had thought of freedom, right? And not unrestrained autonomy. And while I do agree that, self-control and morals have a huge part to do with our freedom, restraining oneself to a one way of thinking, and reflecting that in the law would be quite the opposite of freedom. Ancient freedom, which I have an image here, the ancient freedom and the modern freedom go hand in hand. So that is why Western civilization is still relevant today, because the thoughts, the ideas, and the government systems that have come from Western civilizations are the foundation for most of our governments today. And we have to understand these concepts and continue to develop those concepts so that they can be spread not just in the West, but throughout the globe. Thank you.